Welcome to the Fantasy's Finest Fantasy Football Podcast. Here are your hosts, William Spencer, Jayden McQueen, and Mark Carter.
What's going on? Welcome back to the Fantasy's Finest Podcast. Yo, it's already been a struggle. Coming out of week 2, heading into week 3, and getting ready for another waiver wire. So in this episode, we're going to be getting you guys ready for another week of waiver wire activity. If you haven't been active on the waiver wire and you're 1-1 or you're 0-2, you definitely want to be listening to what options you have available for yourself on the waiver wire heading into week 3. And it's a Victory Tuesday, of course. So if you got the dub in your leagues this week, be forever thankful, because week 1 was rough. I think I told you on the last episode, week 1 for me, across all of my leagues, I ended up 5-12. This week, week 2, much better turnout, 10-7 across my fantasy leagues, and I survived another week in the Guillotine League, so that's a plus for me. Guillotine leagues are stressful, but they're so addictive because you only got 1 week. If you don't make the score and your team falls to the bottom, you're getting chopped, and all your players are ending up on the waiver wire. So the Guillotine League has been a great experience. I've been doing it over last season and this season. So it's 2 years. It's going on 2 years. So yeah, I think it's going to be a staple of mine to stay in the Guillotine League. Shout out to my homie, Mr. Grimes, for bringing me into the league. But yeah, this is going to be a fun episode. We got to get you guys right for the waiver wire. Give you some options. I'm going to hit you with some news. All I'm going to say is, if you got a quarterback on this list this week, I feel for you, because I've been there. A lot of quarterbacks are going down, coming out of week 2's games, or are banged up. So we're going to be covering some of that news in our news and notes segment. And of course, like I said in the outset, we're going to get you guys ready for waiver wires for week 3. Now, you know what you got to do in the meantime. Subscribe to the podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Fantasy's Finest. You can also check out the podcast on audio format in your favorite platforms like Audio, Audacity, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We are there. And we got 2 shows. 2 shows. The mainstay is the Fantasy's Finest podcast, which is what you're watching right now, and our 5-minute podcast called The Blitz. So you can get all you need. If you can't listen to the long form, we got you on a short one. So make sure that you check that out. But yeah, week 2, much better, 10-7 across my leagues. And shout out to the Cowboys for pulling one out of their behinds and getting the dub against the Giants. Now, I'm going to be honest, shouldn't have gone to overtime against the Giants. I'm gonna just say that. But a win is a win, right? That's all that matters. We got the dub. Good job. I need my defense to tighten up a little bit more than they did. They had Russell Wilson looking like prime Seattle Russell Wilson in that game, throwing the ball all over the place. And a guy on the Giants might or might not be on the waiver wire list. So I don't want to give it up. Let the cat out of the bag. But if you know who I'm talking about, you definitely should be thinking about whether or not you want to add him if you need a wide receiver. But let's get into the episode, because I don't want to go on and talk on too much. So first, let's get into the news and see what's going on as we get ready for another week of fantasy football. News and notes from around the NFL.
News and notes from around the NFL.
All right, man. So remember I said, if you got this guy, I feel your pain. Joe Burrow. The Bengals lose their star quarterback for another 3 months. Joe Burrow went down in week 2 against the Jacksonville Jaguars with a turf toe variant. Now, I've never heard it put this way, but apparently this is something different. It's considered a grade 3 injury, which means that his length of time for being out in recovery, he's got to have surgery on the toe. He's going to be out for at least 3 months, according to several reports. Now, I have a friend, if he's listening, We tried to tell you in the group chat that this was going to happen. This is what the news was coming out. You didn't want to believe us. You told us we were speculating. Adam Schefter don't know what he's talking about, apparently. Ian Rappaport don't know what he's talking about, apparently. The only person that's playing it close to the vest is Zach Taylor because he's, mums the word. We don't really know what the length of time is for Joe Burrow to be missing. And of course, they're going to try and get him back earlier because you don't want to miss out on your chance to get into the playoffs. So it makes sense that Zach Taylor is not giving out the information, but according to the reports, because of what the injury is, and is considered a grade 3 injury, turf toe, the recovery time is longer than being placed on IR for 4 games. So it's unfortunate that the Bengals lost their star quarterback to this injury, but P, we tried to tell you. So directly to you, P, we tried to tell you, man. But let's keep it moving because there's other quarterbacks that have gone down because of injury. Vikings quarterback J.J. McCarthy is dealing with a high ankle injury. He's going to be out for the next 2 to 4 weeks. He's already been ruled out for week 3. So they're not going to be with their star quarterback or their new franchise quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. The Vikings also lost Aaron Jones to a hamstring injury. He's been placed on injury reserve. So they're not going to have their star quarterback and their top running back for the next 4 weeks. That sucks. But this has been a thing with Aaron Jones, and this is kind of why I don't draft Aaron Jones, because he ends up getting hurt. He's been dealing with hamstring injuries for the last few seasons. They always tend to pop up at the wrong time. I mean, most injuries do. So you're playing a physical game. So I'm not going to harp on that for Aaron Jones. But to lose Aaron Jones this early in the season, it definitely sucks, for lack of a better word. The Commanders, they also have injury issues. Quarterback Jayden Daniels is dealing with a sprained knee. Now, remember, after the Thursday night football game against the Packers, Jayden Daniels, Jayden Daniels had to get an MRI on his knee. He was diagnosed with a sprained knee, and now his status for week 3 is up in the air per several reports. So we got to keep an eye on what that situation is and whether or not he'll be able to play in week 3. So if he can't go, you're definitely going to want to pivot and try and find another option on the waiver wire if you don't already have a backup quarterback on your roster. Now, Texans coach DeMeco Ryans says he expects to get Christian Kirk back in week 3. Kirk's been dealing with a hamstring injury. He missed the start of the season. So hopefully him coming back will open up the field and get some speed out there. Jets head coach Aaron Glenn says that it would be hard to start quarterback Justin Fields if he doesn't practice Wednesday or Thursday. Now, Fields, in case you missed it, went down in the second half of week 2's game with a concussion. He was not able to return. Tyrod Taylor came in relief. And if he can't go in week 3, Tyrod Taylor would be the starter for the New York Jets. And Packers wide receiver Jayden Reed had a successful surgery on both his foot and his clavicle. Reed went down against the Commanders on Thursday Night Football. He's already been placed on injury reserve, and he isn't expected back until later in the season. Now, the Packers are hopeful to get him back in sometime in November, but it's unclear if he will be able to return. Hopefully, like I said, hopefully he'll be back in November. And if you're planning on dropping him, you have the option to do that. If you have the injury reserve on your fantasy roster and you have more than 1 or 2 slots, I would throw him in there if you don't want to get rid of him. But that'll do it for the news. That's all we got for this one. So now let's get into our main segment. Let's see what options are out there in waiver wire land for week 3. Alrighty, now like I said, we got to talk about the quarterback position because all these guys are getting beat up, and I know you're probably starting a few. So if you need some options, I got you covered. Now we got to talk about the biggest option heading into the waiver wire this week. He probably should be rostered a little bit, but I can understand why people aren't really jumping on the bandwagon just yet because of who he is and how he's played in the past. But I got to be honest. This dude has been balling since the start of the season. So it's only been 2 weeks, So I get the trepidation. I understand why people aren't like, yo, let's go. But Daniel Jones, Indianapolis Colts quarterback, he's only rostered in 21% of ESPN leagues, and he's still available. Now, like I said, Daniel Jones, is he going to be able to keep this going? The hope here is that he is. Indianapolis is currently in the lead in the division. Daniel Jones has been balling over the first two games. He came out and spanked Miami in week 1, had a tougher opponent in week 2 against the Denver Broncos, showed up, 20 fantasy points in both of those matchups, 26.2 fantasy points on average heading into week 3. He's giving you rushing upside. Now, granted, it's not a lot. He's only got, 28 yards rushing? But he is punching in touchdowns at the goal line. He's got 3 already this season. So he's already looking good as a passer. He's giving you rushing upside. He's giving you touchdown upside. And he's currently the QB2 heading into week 3. Have we ever seen this kind of Daniel Jones for fantasy football? We've caught some glimpses when he was with New York, with the Giants. But this version of Daniel Jones, he might be worth buying into. And if you don't have Joe Burrow, this would be a great pivot to grab up the hottest quarterback in fantasy football right now, heading into week 3. So if you got a chance to get Daniel Jones and he's not already been picked up in your leagues, I would definitely make the move to grab him up. Daniel Jones is having some sort of resurgence right now. He's looking good in the Colts offense. He's got weapons around him. He's got Michael Pittman. Tyler Warren is balling right now. And part of the reason that he is not only just because he's in the Colts offense and Shane Steichen has finally got that tight end that he's always wanted, but he's got a quarterback that can get him the ball in Daniel Jones. And Daniel Jones is taking care of the ball as well. And that's something that we want for fantasy because we don't want a quarterback to throw a lot of interceptions. And Daniel Jones is getting it done. So if you can, get Daniel Jones on your roster. Now, another guy that you might not be paying attention to because of the person that was in front of him, and he hasn't played this season yet, is Carson Wentz for the Minnesota Vikings. Now, with J.J. McCarthy already expected to miss 4 weeks, he's been placed on injury reserve. Carson Wentz is going to get the start. Now, the hope here is that Kevin O'Connell magic, hopefully Carson Wentz can get a touch of that like Sam Darnold did, like Kirk Cousins did, that OG veteran Kevin O'Connell, whatever he does to those veteran quarterbacks that he gets his hands on, hopefully we can get that with Carson Wentz. He's got the weapons. Jordan Addison is going to come back in week 4. He's got one more game rather for his suspension. You got Justin Jefferson, who's a staple in the offense. And Carson Wentz has shown the ability to throw the ball. What more nice things can I say about Carson Wentz? Well, he doesn't play for the Eagles anymore, so that's great. But yeah, Carson Wentz could be a guy that you want to target for fantasy, for if you need a quarterback. He's on the waiver wire for free. He might be a guy that you can slink onto your team while everybody else is focused on other bigger name quarterbacks. So this might be a guy that you can get under the radar, as it were, if anybody's looking at the Vikings, for potential anyway. Now, if you need a veteran quarterback who may still be on the waiver wire, why don't you take a look at Matthew Stafford, rostered at just 33% on ESPN leagues. Stafford, he's currently inside the top 20 among fantasy quarterbacks. He's giving you 15.5 fantasy points per game. He's giving you the volume. He's averaging about 31 pass attempts per game over the first 2 weeks. He's got 3 passing touchdowns. I remember week 1 was a little rough, but to be fair, a lot of quarterbacks came out of week 1 looking kind of sloppy. That's what happens when you don't play, preseason. But then again, we can't really give Joe Burrow a pass because he played in the preseason and he was garbage in week 1. I'm sorry. But, Matthew Stafford is going to start ramping up. He's going to give you more volume because all they do in Los Angeles is throw the ball. They got Puka Nacua. Devontae Adams looked great in week 2 as opposed to week 1. He's getting the targets. So those are going to be the guys for Matthew Stafford to key in on, and that's going to lend to some fantasy production. And it probably would lend well, is depending on the kind of roster that you have that would be able to support Matthew Stafford, even if he doesn't give you a monster game or a monster week. But he's still giving you enough production or enough volume where he can be relied on as a good passer, especially if you need him. So Matthew Stafford, veteran presence. Take a look at him if you need him. Jake Browning, the backup quarterback for Joe Burrow, he impressed a little bit coming in relief for Joe Burrow after he went down. He won the game for the Jags, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 32 pass attempts. He's going to give you the volume, but with Browning, you got to understand what you're getting. You're going to get the touchdowns, you're going to get the volume, you're going to get the pass attempts, but you're going to get interceptions too. So keep that in mind. If you're willing to risk it for Jake Browning, it's probably going to be another quarterback who's going to be considered on a lower end, not like the other bigger name guys that may still be out there in your fantasy leagues. But if you need this is more like a desperate heave. He's going to give you, like I say, he's going to give you the pass attempts because he's going to throw the ball. But your potential for interceptions is up there as well. You might want to pay attention to your league settings because getting interceptions, they suck. And getting pick sixes, they also suck. I remember I have a league right now where if your quarterback throws a pick six, some leagues may have it where it's just -4. No, you throw a pick six, it's like -6 points. It's like throwing a touchdown against your own quarterback. So make sure you check your league settings before you pick one of these guys up and he throwing a bunch of duck touchdowns all over the place. But Jake Browning is probably your lower end guy. He's rostered in less than 1% of ESPN leagues, so he's out there if you need him. Now let's switch gears. We got other positions that we might need to look at, and one guy who's still available, rostered at about 40%, is Basul Tootin. Now Tank Bigsby, he's gone. He's with the New England Patriots. He's with the Philadelphia Eagles. He's stuck in Backupsville, so he's no longer fantasy relevant unless something happens to Saquon Barkley. But with Tootin getting the backup role behind Travis Etienne, he's the immediate handcuff, so there's value there. He also is getting work. He's not getting a lot of work, but he still managed to have a decent week 2 outing, 15.4 fantasy points, 8 carries, 42 yards, averaging 5.2 yards per attempt. They're going to want to get him the ball more and get him involved in harmony with what Travis Etienne is giving fantasy managers and the Jacksonville Jaguars, of course, on the ground and through the air. He's very versatile. Had 32 receiving yards in week 2, added a touchdown passing. I mean, he ain't throw the ball, he receiving. But Tootin has some standalone value there, as well as being a handcuff to Etienne. We know Etienne has dealt with injuries before, so to be able to lock in Tootin as a potential running back one in the event that something happens to Etienne, it's always something to consider. I wish I had Tootin. I know he's been picked up in a couple of my leagues, so I don't have the opportunity to get him. So I'm trying to put you guys on so that you can have the chance to grab Tootin. Now, some wide receivers to consider. Romeo Doubs, rostered at 20% of ESPN leagues. Now, here's the thing. We all want Matthew Golden to be the guy. Let's just clear the air. We want Matthew Golden to be the guy. The fact that he hasn't been getting enough work right now is kind of frustrating because the Packers used the first round pick to get Golden, and now they haven't really been incorporating him in the offense just yet. But maybe this injury with Jayden Reed is something that will crack that door open. But we can't ignore what Romeo Doubs is doing or could do in the future because he benefits from Jayden Reed being injured and being out and missing time. Romeo Doubs is going to get that boost of fantasy value. He's going to be a more reliable option as they continue to work Matthew Golden into the offense and get him more acclimated to the NFL speeds and prepare him to eventually, I feel like he's eventually going to be that number one guy. You don't waste a first round pick on a wide receiver and don't use him. You're going to be, or Matthew Golden is going to be, at least in my opinion, one of the top options in the Packers offense the later we get into the season. But that doesn't mean that Romeo Doubs doesn't have any fantasy value. He's the only one to score a touchdown at the wide receiver position in week 2 against the Green Bay Packers. I mean, not the Green Bay Packers. See what I'm doing? I don't know what I'm doing today. Against the Commanders, I hope he don't score touchdowns against himself. But he's going to see more targets. There should be enough volume for Romeo Doubs to be or to have a significant role in the offense moving forward. We know Jordan Love likes to throw the ball around and spread it along his wide receivers. You still have Dontavian Wicks out there. Savion Williams is another rookie who may see some added fantasy value. And we have already spoken about Matthew Golden as his potential could rise. You do have Tucker Kraft, though, who popped up. I know they were talking about him, especially Jordan Love was talking about Tucker Kraft this offseason. But man, did I not expect him to be this involved this early. Maybe that's one of the things that's slowing down Golden's progression, because Tucker Kraft is crushing it right now. I can't think of a better phrase to describe what he's doing, but it's good for fantasy. So if it's good for fantasy, it's good for me. Another wide receiver to consider, Wan'Dale Robinson. Now, this could be an anomaly because the Giants were out there in a shootout with the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys secondary was either not prepared or they just didn't know what they were doing. Now, to me, it looked like they were out of position. There's no way on God's green earth that you're watching Wan'Dale Robinson blow by you and Malik Neighbors blow by you. The safety is not deep enough, and we're getting cooked like this. You have to be aware of game situations. And Wan'Dale Robinson and Russell Wilson and the New York Giants took advantage of the secondary pieces for the Dallas Cowboys being out of position. Wan'Dale Robinson had a freaking game. 8 of 10 for 142 yards and a touchdown, 28 fantasy points in week 2. He finished as a top 10 wide receiver for week 2. 18 targets over the first 2 weeks of the season, double-digit fantasy points in both games. If Wan'Dale Robinson continues to not only be a deep threat, but a more reliable option for Russell Wilson, because no one knows what Jalen Hyatt is doing. So it's Malik Neighbors and then Wan'Dale Robinson. Those are the top 2 receiving options. And Russell is going to get those guys the ball. He's comfortable throwing with them. And you know he got that deep ball ready to get launched off. Wan'Dale Robinson could be a nice pickup. Like I said, he's only rostered in 30% of ESPN leagues. Wan'Dale Robinson should be on your target list for week 3's waiver wire report. And I can't say it enough. When they threw that touchdown late in the game to Wan'Dale Robinson, I'm sitting there on my couch like, there's no way that they're going to throw this ball. No, he's not going to throw this ball, because you know that he's going to go deep. That's what Russell Wilson does. Chucks the ball. Safety is not deep enough. Trayvon Diggs gets cooked. He gets cooked. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my God, I can't believe we might lose to the Giants. But Cowboys pull it off. Dak Prescott has a nice run in overtime. Should have went to overtime. And my man Brandon, ice in his veins, Aubrey, kicks the game-winning field goal and gets us the dub. So I can't be mad at that. Another wide receiver to consider, Denver Broncos wide receiver Troy Franklin. Rostered in just 2% of ESPN leagues. He's available, had an incredible game against the Indianapolis Colts in week 2. 8 of 9 for 89 yards and a touchdown. He saw a lot of work, surprisingly a lot of work in that game against the Colts. Courtland Sutton did not have a great game by comparison. And while we don't expect that kind of situation to happen too frequently this season, it is good to see that there's another pass catcher that's comfortable and gelling with Bo Nix, because Evan Ingram hasn't given us anything at the tight end position just yet. And he's been dealing with injury. Remember, he went down in week 1 with a hamstring. He did play in week 2, but he didn't give us anything that would warrant, saying that he's going to be the second option as he was perceived to be before the season started. But it looks like Troy Franklin has stepped into that role, and hopefully he'll be able to keep that going and be active for Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos offense. I particularly like this pickup. I like to stash. He would be a guy that I would stash in my deeper leagues to have him just in case. And if he continues to blow up, I got a trade piece. I love picking up players on the waiver wire and using them in packages for trades if I need something or I need to fix a hole in my team, or if I have to deal with an injury, I got some value on my bench that I can use to offer to fix those spots. So you got to be active. There's more than one reason to be active in the waiver wire each and every week. There shouldn't be a week going by where you're not trying to make a roster move on the waiver wire, because you're never going to have 100% of the guys on your bench balling out. It's just not going to happen. So when you look at your bench and you say, well, you know what, man? This guy right here is not doing anything. It's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and I still got him on my bench and he hasn't done anything. It might be time to move on from that player. So you always want to make sure that you got space in your roster or on your bench to add players off the waiver wire. And we'll wrap it up with this guy, Tennessee Titans wide receiver Alec Aomine. I know I'm chopping his name up. Aominer. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name. The sad part is I Googled how to pronounce that name beforehand before I started recording, and I still chopped it up. But the number 2 wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans, that guy over there, Mr. Alec, he's been producing for the Tennessee Titans. He's another wide receiver who's comfortable with his quarterback, and his quarterback feels like he can rely on him to get some work done. Week 2 versus the Rams, 15.6 fantasy points. He currently is the second most targeted pass catcher on the Tennessee Titans roster. He has sleeper appeal. He's not a huge name, but the production that he's putting out is warrant enough for him to be able to get on a fantasy roster. You might not have to start him, or you might be able to throw him in a flex spot, but it's always good to have those options. So make sure, like with anybody else, you got some names to target on the waiver wire. If you need any of these guys, you definitely add them for this week, because you don't want to pass up on them. Or the worst thing that you can do is that if you miss on these guys and they still happen to be out on the waiver wire and they have another great game, now the attention is going to go up on those players. So get ahead of the curve, stash these guys on your fantasy rosters, and who knows? They might be able to help you win your fantasy league. But that will wrap it up for this episode. It's been fun talking to you guys. So make sure that you're subscribed to the Fantasy's Finest YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode. And make sure y'all hit that bell, so that way when we drop the new episodes, you'll be right there to be able to benefit from us being able to help you. That'll do it for this episode. Make sure that you also check out the fantasysfinest.com. We're propping up more articles every day to make sure that you guys are right for each week of fantasy football. And of course, follow us on social media. Fantasy's Finest at Fantasy's Finest. FF Finest is our new handle, in case you didn't know. So make sure that you lock in with that and follow us on your favorite social media platforms like TikTok, YouTube. Well, we of course subscribe on YouTube, but TikTok, we got a Facebook page, we got all that stuff, the Twitter, make sure, or X now. I'm old school, I still like calling it Twitter, but follow us on X. You're not gonna miss much because you're gonna be following us and we're gonna get you right. But that'll do it for the episode. I will see you guys in the next one. Till then, be safe and enjoy another week of fantasy football.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy's Finest podcast. Be sure to join the community on Facebook and follow us on Twitter too at the Fantasy's Finest. See you next episode.